In this class, we are going to look at the reigns of Stephen and Matilda, that is, after the life and time of Henry the First. Now, who was Stephen? He is also known as Stephen of Blois or Stephen of Boulogne. It refers to the same person. So he also belonged to the royal blood. He was William the Conqueror's grandson. So this is the family line. So you have William the Conqueror. He was followed by William, his son, William Rufus. If you remember, he ruled for around 3 years. So William Rufus. After that, you have Henry the First. So when you're talking about the chronology, after William the One, you have Henry the First. We are talking about the major rulers. In between, we also had the time of William the Second, who ruled for a short period of just 3 years. Now, William the Conqueror, he had these three sons, and in addition, he had a daughter, Adela, who was married to Stephen of Blois. Blois is a place in France, right? But the rules of succession says it would go to the sons, right? So it would go to the eldest one, but then eldest was the Duke of Normandy, so it went to the next one, that is William the Second. But then he didn't live for long, so it was followed by he was followed by Henry the First. Now, after Henry the First, we'd already seen that how he had a son who was drowned in a shipwreck. So he did not have male living heirs. So he had only this daughter, Matilda. Now, this Matilda, she was married to Count Geoffrey of Anjou. Anjou again in France. So she was settled in France. So at the time of his death, Henry the First had made his courtiers, his nobles, and lords swear an oath of fealty, wherein they had promised that after his death, Matilda would be sworn as the next ruler. But then, after Henry I's death, it did not happen that way. So, all these people, all these courtiers, the nobles and lords, they selected Stephen. They selected Stephen, who is actually Matilda's cousin. Stephen has the next king. So he was sworn in as the next king. And then later we find after Stephen, it was again Matilda's son, Henry, who we'll call Henry II, who sat on the throne after Stephen. So here you have an interlude. So after Henry I, it is straight away Stephen. And after Stephen, for some time it was Matilda, then again it was Stephen, and then you have Henry II. So we'll look at the list of events, what transpired, and why do we have so much of a mess here. See, this has been written into, you could say, even seminal works, wherein you have this, look at this cover of a book, Stephen and Matilda, Cousins of Anarchy. Why anarchy? Because after Stephen was sworn as the king, Matilda declared a war on her cousin, and she came from France to England to capture the throne of England, and there was a civil war. So here you have a pair of warring cousins. So the book is all about that, Stephen and Matilda. And British government later had come out with a stamp. You can see a stamp here commemorating whatever had happened during their time, Stephen and Matilda's time. So you have Stephen fighting the Earl of Gloucester. Then you have Matilda there watching, biding her time. And here you have Matilda and her family, Geoffrey of Anjou. And then you have the little Henry, who would go on to become Henry II. And here you have Matilda. Now, who was Stephen of Boulogne or Stephen of Blois? So now, after the death of Henry I, the Magnum Concilium, that is the Council of Ministers at the court, and the Curia Regis, that is the king's court. They laid aside the oath of fealty that was sworn to his daughter Matilda. The king had made them swear this oath of making his daughter the next ruler, which these people conveniently kept aside. So, what did they do? They chose Henry's nephew, Stephen of Boulogne, as the next king. So, he was sworn in as the next king. Why did they do that? Because they knew Stephen was not very strong and they wanted a king like that. Only then could they have their way. They wanted to do whatever they wanted, right? All these nobles and lords. So they wanted a weak king, not someone strong, and not someone like Henry the First, because some of them were kind of unhappy, because we had already seen how Henry the First was a very capable person who could control and keep everyone under his control. He could run the country the way he wanted. So now, after his death, the lords, they did not want that. So therefore, they went and they sworn in Henry's nephew, Stephen of Boulogne, as the next king. So he was a brave soldier, but then he was a weak king. And this was the very reason why he was chosen as the king. So he was not able to rule firmly and diplomatically. And his reign, his time was characterized by anarchy, and there were many assertive Norman nobles. There was a lot of infighting. So all these men who were kind of feeling suppressed and silenced by Henry the First, now they all got into fight with each other, because all of them were trying to take their share of the pie. They were all trying to be powerful. So one prominent lord was Geoffrey de Manuel. He was somebody very cruel. He would tax people a lot, and whoever was under him had a very tough time. So he is remembered as this very cruel person who added to the woes of the land. And when you look at history books, it would tell you about these 19 long winters with life and property endangered. So there was no proper security, because when the king is weak, you know what would happen to the citizens. So there was no security anywhere. So here we have the picture of Stephen of Boulogne, or you call it Stephen of Blois. Now, where is Blois? Blois is this area in France, and this is Anjou. Anjou. By now, you must be familiar with, at least roughly familiar with, the map of both England as well as France. Now, this is Brittany. You can see Brittany, right? And why it is called Brittany. Here you have Normandy. I hope you remember all that. So this is Anjou. Matilda was married to the Count of Anjou, and her cousin came from this area, because Stephen's mother, Adela, was married to this gentleman, this count from Blois, and their son is Stephen. Now, what happened to Henry the First's daughter, Matilda? She's also called Maud, Queen Maud. Why do we have another name for Matilda? Is because there are many Matildas here now. So, there's this possibility of getting confused. If you remember, Henry the First, his wife was also called Matilda. Now, his daughter is also called Matilda. We are talking about the daughter here, and we'll see again Stephen was also married to a lady called Matilda. So plenty of Matildas, right? So this Matilda, that is Henry the First daughter, is also known as Maud. Now she got the support of all the Norman nobles who did not have much power or position in the English court, and also the bishops who had quarreled with Stephen. So anyone who had a grouse against Stephen, they all went and sided with Matilda or Maud. So now, with the support of all these people, all these nobles and all these bishops, she felt emboldened. So she landed in England in 1141 AD with a huge army to stake her claim to the throne of England. And what was her claim? That my father had said, her father had actually made the court swear that oath of fealty, that she would be made the next ruler, right? So, but it was not done that way. So now she is coming and staking her claim. So after this, there was a battle, and in the battle, what happened? Stephen was taken prisoner, and Matilda was crowned the Queen of England. So this she sat on the throne of England. Now, Matilda, she turned out to be worse than her cousin Stephen. She raised the taxes and she gained the displeasure of all the powerful citizens and the London burghers, that is, all these eminent people of London. They retaliated by expelling her from London even before her coronation. So you can see the kind of discontent that was brewing against Matilda immediately after her coronation, or the declaration that she would be the next queen of England. So she did not have any support. So you can see all the ones who had supported her would have felt really betrayed. Now, she was very unpopular and she was nothing like her father. She didn't have any of his qualities. And she had a brother, a step brother, maybe, not a proper brother. And what happened was this brother was captured by Stephen's henchmen. Stephen, like though he was in prison now, he did have his supporters. And all these supporters, history would tell you, were actually controlled and guided by another Matilda, that is Stephen's wife. She was one plucky, powerful woman. She played her cards really well for her husband. So the time when he was in the prison, it was she who was running the show for him. So she collected Stephen's henchmen. She is the one, master brain behind whatever happened after that. So she collected all these people. So these henchmen, they captured Queen Matilda's brother, and then they put forward this what do you call, that is, for his release, she had to release King Stephen. So now you can see this kind of tit for tat. So now Stephen was helped by his wife, who was another Matilda. So now Queen Matilda, she had no other go but to liberate Stephen. So Stephen had to be liberated from the prison. So, and what happened? Well, this liberated Stephen, he rallied his followers and he attacked Matilda. So, all his followers, they came together and they attacked Matilda. And Matilda knew now she would not be able to stay there in England, because the ones who had supported her also had turned against her. Why? Because they had seen what kind of an unpopular queen she was, raising taxes, not really caring about the country. So now, liberated Stephen, with his helpers and supporters, he attacked Matilda, and Matilda knew that she would not be able to hit back and win. So she escaped. She escaped to Anjou, and then you have Stephen again sitting on the throne of England. Now, after this, what happened? Now, if you remember, Matilda, she had a son, Henry, named after his grandfather. So Matilda's son Henry, he believed that the kingdom rightfully belonged to his mother, because his grandfather had made his courtiers, these lords, swear that oath of fealty, right? So he believed that the kingdom of England rightfully belonged to his mother. And this Henry, he became the Count of Anjou. That is after his father. Now he became the Count of Anjou, and also he was the Duke of Normandy. So you can see a huge area of France was already under him, Anjou and Normandy. And he also married this lady, Eleanor of Aquitaine, another province in France. So he had lordship over vast tracts of land. So already very powerful, very rich, right? And he lorded over a large area from the English Channel to the Pyrenees. And, that was the extent of land under him. And he decided to claim the throne of England as rightfully his. So he arrived at this place called Wallingford Castle, which was earlier faithful to his mother. His mother, when she had landed in England, she was supported by many people, right? So this was one place where she had a lot of support base, Wallingford. So that's why the son also went and landed there. So he arrived at Wallingford Castle, because he was sure of getting the support of the people of that area, Wallingford. So he had the support of many barons. So anyone who had anything against Stephen, they were all here supporting Henry. And what happened? There was no proper battle as such, but then Stephen knew he would not be able to really defeat Henry, because he already had a lot of support, his friends' support, plus the support that he was getting from England, many barons. So, what happened? Stephen, he had to sign a treaty, and this treaty is known as the Treaty of Wallingford, and it was signed in 1153. So, now what is this Treaty of Wallingford? Stephen was made to sign this treaty, and it was signed between Stephen and Henry II, that is Matilda's son. What were the terms? That Stephen could continue to be the king and rule England till his death. And after his death, the kingdom will pass into the hands of Henry. That was the deal, and this was quite acceptable for both the parties. And it was also ideal. Why? Because Stephen and his wife Matilda, they had no children. They had no children, so there was no dispute to the succession. So obviously there wouldn't be anybody staking the claim that Stephen did not have any heirs. He did not have any children. So now at the death of Stephen, the crowning of Henry was peacefully done, and he was made the king of England in 1154. Now, with the crowning of Henry the second, you have the beginning of the age of the great Angevin kings. Angevin kings, as in the house of Anjou. So you have and they are known as the Angevin king. So he's the first Angevin king, and it's also known as the house of the Plantagenets. Why is it called the Plantagenets? Everything we'll see in the next class, wherein we'll be looking at the life and time of Henry II. So with the accession of Henry II, we have the beginning of this long line of rulers known as Angevin kings, and they are known as, or the royal household is known as the house of the Plantagenets. So here you have a painting from that period. You have here his son William Rufus, who sat on the throne for a very short time, 3 years, and then you have his youngest son Henry the First, being on the throne for around 35 years, if you remember. And also he had this daughter Adela. Right now Henry had this daughter Matilda, and Matilda sat on the throne for a short time. We had seen that, and Matilda was followed by Henry II, that is her son. So there is an interlude here in between. So Adela's son Stephen was made king after the death of Henry I. So instead of Matilda, Stephen sat on the throne for some time. Then you have Matilda coming and attacking Stephen being imprisoned, and Matilda sitting on the throne of England for a short time. But then what happened? Stephen, with the help of his wife Matilda and his henchmen, they kidnapped Matilda's brother, and in exchange, what happened? They demanded that Stephen be set free. So see, Stephen was set free, and what did Stephen do? Stephen, again with the help of his followers, he attacked Matilda. Now Matilda, instead of fighting it out, she escaped to Anjou. That is her, husband's place. She went back to Anjou in France. And after some time, what happened? Her son Henry, whom we call Henry II, after growing up, he staked the claim on the throne of England, saying that it actually belonged to his mother. So Stephen was not bold enough or strong enough to meet him in battle. So what happened? He was made to sign a treaty of Wallingford, and the treaty said that Stephen could continue to rule England till his death, and after his death, the kingdom would pass on to Henry II. And it was acceptable to Stephen also. They did not have any problem with that. That is Stephen and Matilda, husband and wife. They did not have any problem because they did not have any children. So after his death, now Henry II was crowned the King of England. And with his accession, you have the beginning of a new bloodline, that is a bloodline of Anjou. So we call them the Angevin kings. So you have the beginning of the Angevin lines, and the house is known as the house of the Plantagenets. So if you look at this, you have William his son Henry. Now Henry, his daughter. Now daughter is married to this gentleman from Anjou. That's why here the bloodline changes. It's not directly son, right? So you have next Henry the second. So from here onwards, you have the beginning of the Angevin kings.